classic cars, they certainly don't make them the way they used to. And even if car manufacturers wanted to make them the way that they used to, they probably wouldn't be able to because of all the regulations that are in place now. Owning a classic car though, your money's never really your own because there's always something that the beast is calling for. This is my 1988 Daimler DS420 and it's had 6 former keepers. I bought the car back in 2017 from a chap in Aberdeen who'd owned it for around 9 years and he was using it as a wedding car. But before this, I know very little about the car's history. So the plan today is to get the car warmed up, get it out on the road, and I'll tell you everything that I do know about this car. A little bit cold, just a tad cold. Let it warm up. Kind of smoking Callum out here as well, with these twin exhausts pumping all this toxic fume into his face. When I first bought this car, it had 65,000 miles on the clock, which was consistent with the overall condition of the vehicle. Like all classic cars, these can suffer from a little bit of corrosion. And I've owned a few in the past. One in particular was a little bit of a nightmare when it came to corrosion, but this is doing well. It's got at least 90% of its original metal. You have to remember that this car has 2 fuel tanks when you pull up at a petrol station, the left and the right, so you have to remember which one you're using at the time, which today it's the left tank. So let's go and fill it up. Although we have twin tanks, I'm a bit ashamed to say that a few years ago one of the fuel pumps broke on the right hand side tank and I've never got it fixed. It's only the left hand tank that works now. When it comes to the miles per gallon of this car, I'm not entirely sure how many it does, but it's got to be at least half a mile per gallon. I use this DS420 as a wedding car, so it's important that the bodywork's always well presented and mechanically it's sound. Now at times, it can present some challenges to keep this vehicle on the road, especially when weddings are in full tilt and it's out almost every weekend, so maintenance is key. I do think it's a good thing that this vehicle is used as a wedding car because it's a way of making money to keep this vehicle on the road. Sure, it can be expensive at times to fix and some of the repairs can be a little bit complicated, but the fact that you're able to keep this vehicle on the road and it's paying for itself to do so, I think is a great thing. Behind the wheel of the Daimler is a great place to be. It's a very old-fashioned car to drive. It just seems to glide along the road. Sure, it's got a bit of power, but it's not about the power. It's about the comfort. It's about the pace. It's just about taking it easy and getting there when you need to get there. Sure, these speed bumps do pose a little bit of a problem for the car because it's so long that if you go too fast, you'll bottom it out. But why would you want to go fast in a Daimler DS420? It's about elegance. It's about style. I've always had a soft spot for British cars and I'm not entirely sure why. Looking at the Daimler from this profile has always reminded me of a very well-rehearsed signature being sketched out by a really expensive fountain pen on paper. I think it's the sloping roof lines and the creased body panels. It's something that you just do not get in modern cars today. This road presence doesn't exist. These cars were produced between 1968 and 1992. This being a later 80s model has got one of these plastic fantastic bumpers. The earlier generations had a much more authentic looking chrome bumper, which I prefer. I have seen some people retrofit that old bumper to these newer cars and it does look really good. That is something that I would like to do, but it does seem like a bit of a job. If you're of a certain age or a car fanatic and a fan of the Crown, then you will know that these cars were used largely by chauffeurs, heads of state, funeral directors, wedding car companies, oh, and the Queen Mother. They're still being used today by the royal family and could be spotted at Harry and Meghan's big day.
The Daimler company was purchased by Jaguar Cars in 1960, which was itself bought by the British Motor Corporation in 1966, becoming part of the larger British Leyland Group in 1968. BMC and Jaguar consolidated efforts in producing the DS420, with most of its engineering being done by Jaguar. A lot of its parts being borrowed from the Jaguar 420G, engine, gearbox, suspension, etc.
So let me take you on a little tour. Most cars are designed around the front seat and what the driver has to experience, but not the Daimler. It's all about the back seat and what's on offer for the passenger. The moment you step inside and you sit on this rear bench, you're swallowed by the comfort of this rear seat. It's hard to explain exactly how comfortable it is to sit on, but the best I can do is, if you imagine going to IKEA, sitting on every single sofa that the store has to offer, choosing the most comfortable sofa, sat in that sofa, then ordering some famous IKEA meatballs and gravy, then eating that IKEA meatballs and gravy while sat in the most comfortable sofa in the store whilst receiving a back massage. It's kind of representative of how comfortable this back seat is. Legroom is unquestionable. There's so much space in the back of here. I'm 6 foot and I'm quite comfortable, and I think I would be even on a long journey. Interestingly, the Daimler's marginally smaller than the more expensive Rolls-Royce from the same era. In the back we've got plenty of gadgets. We've got endless amounts of ashtrays, cigarette lighters, lights for reading on those long trips, heater controls, and even for the summer months, air conditioning. There's added traditional comforts which you don't really see that often in modern cars, such as these padded armrests, handles, and vented windows. The thing about Daimler limousines is they were almost indefinitely customizable. This vehicle's relatively basic, the highlight being air conditioning in the back, although some of the cars were built like little mini offices, some with computers, some with telephones, some with mini bars, some even with flux capacitors. There is a bit of a party trick on offer in the back of the Daimler. If you've got long legs like me and want to act like a thug, then you can use them as a footrest, but they are a third row of seats and they can just be pulled down like so, allowing you to get all your friends into the back of this car as you're being chauffeur driven around the city, all socially distanced of course. When it comes to the boot, you need to remember that if you own one of these cars, then the space in the boot needs to be big enough for all your trips to Harrods and all those bags and boxes that one may acquire on those trips. And you're certainly not disappointed with boot space in the Daimler. We've definitely got enough space for all of our camera gear, which does us fine. You have to remember that there's 2 petrol tanks either side here, so you need to tell your butler to put his cigarette out before loading all of your bags. The front cabin doesn't have the same level of comfort consistent with the rear, but I suppose back in the day if you owned one of these vehicles you wouldn't care because you wouldn't be driving it, it would just be a chauffeur. This rear partition forces the 2 front seats to be somewhat upright, and although the chairs do share the same IKEA grade meatball levels of comfort, it's just a little bit less relaxing to be sat in this seat compared to the back. The dashboard is a wonder. I absolutely love the materials used and the quality of all the switchgear. Although I must say the switchgear is a little bit confusing. If I run through what we have available here, we've got all of our essential dials, our fuel, our oil, our coolants. Then moving down, we've got interior light switches. We've got fan controls. We've got the cigar lighter, we've got our hazard lights, we've got our fuel tanks whether you want to switch between the left or the right, we've got our wiper control and washer control, we've then got heating control below. We have a really small glove box which is full of junk. We have a large pouch below which is ideal for your sandwiches and your packed lunch when you're out chauffeuring people. I've got an empty slot where a radio could be spec'd when you bought this car new, and also a reminder that it's the left tank that we're using at the moment. Either side of the gear selector we've got these climate control vents, which is operated by this air conditioning switch here, which allows for your knee to be nice and cold in the summer. The previous owner upgraded the ignition system to an electronic one and made a rather unsubtle attempt at doing so, but it all seems to work fine. When it comes to airflow in the cabin, we have this button which you can push and the vent pops up on the bonnet. Or you've got the more manual option of these vented windows, which I absolutely love and are a choice favourite of mine, especially with the twin carburetors. Sometimes the fumes in this cabin are just a little bit much and you need to open the windows before you pass out. the engine bay. Now, I've obviously spent quite a lot of time looking in here over the years, but I must say this vehicle's been rather reliable, and the only things I've ever really replaced or refurbed is a starting motor, the twin carbs, and maybe a water pump. The engine itself is a 4.2 litre straight six, and it's a displacement of the old Jag XK engine.
I've seen some information online which said that there are less than 800 DS420s still registered on UK roads. Now, I've seen some lovely examples of these cars, and I'm guilty of not looking after this vehicle to the best of my ability, but I do intend to keep this on the road for as long as possible. Anything it needs, it gets. For obvious reasons, this car hasn't seen much action over the last 12 months, and has, like most of my other cars, been sat in the garage. It does need some cosmetic work at present. I have just had the twin carbs refurbed, and I plan to get it into my mechanic as soon as we finish filming for a rather nasty oil leak.
There is a small army of people out there that do a much better job than me at looking after these beasts, at sourcing parts and restoring them. So if any of you know any more about the history of my vehicle, then please do let me know. Similarly, if you enjoyed this content, then please like and subscribe to the channel, as we will be releasing more content over the coming weeks.